The listing appeared on a Thursday evening, tucked between overpriced cabins and bland suburban rentals. It was called the Ridgeview Retreat, a home with memory. The photos were warm and inviting exposed beams, a stone fireplace, a porch overlooking a valley wrapped in morning fog. The kind of place that made you imagine coffee steaming in your hands before you even booked it. Claire found it first. She was scrolling through options for a weekend getaway. Something quiet, something simple, something that didn't feel like the city breathing down her neck. Mark leaned over her shoulder and said, "That one, it feels peaceful." He didn't know why he said it. He just did. The listing had 5-star reviews, but they were strangely vague. Unforgettable stay. The house knows what you need. We'll never forget our time here. No photos from guests. No detailed comments. Just short, glowing fragments that felt more like confessions than reviews. At the bottom of the listing was a single line that made Claire pause. "Please respect the house's memories." She laughed it off. Mark said it was probably some quirky branding. They booked it for 2 nights. When they arrived, the host, Evelyn, was waiting on the porch. She was older, with silver hair pulled back neatly and eyes that seemed to study them with a quiet intensity. She handed them a jar of homemade jam and said, "The house likes new stories. Make sure you give it something good." Claire smiled politely. Mark raised an eyebrow. Evelyn didn't explain. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and something sweeter, like old perfume. The floors creaked in a way that felt intentional, as if announcing their steps. A family portrait hung above the fireplace. A woman who looked exactly like Evelyn, standing beside people whose faces had been scratched out. Claire assumed it was some kind of artistic statement. Mark said nothing. As they unpacked, Claire noticed something odd. The guest book on the table had dozens of entries, but many of the names repeated, same handwriting, same dates, years apart. One entry read, "Back again. Didn't expect to return. The house remembers." She closed the book quickly. That night, as fog rolled across the valley and the fireplace crackled, Claire heard humming downstairs. Soft, melodic, familiar. She nudged Mark awake. He listened, frowned, and said, "Probably the wind." But Claire knew the sound of a human voice. She stepped into the hallway, heart thudding, and saw something that made her breath catch. The family portrait above the fireplace was different. The scratched-out faces were now faintly visible, blurred, but present, and the woman who looked like Evelyn seemed to be smiling wider. Claire backed away slowly. The house settled around her, with groaning like a long exhale, and somewhere in the dark, the humming continued. The first night in the Ridgeview Retreat feels almost too quiet, the kind of quietness that presses against your ears, making you aware of your own breathing. Claire lies awake long after Mark has fallen asleep, listening to the house settle. The creaks are rhythmic, almost patterned, like footsteps pacing above them. At 12:14 a.m., the humming begins again. Soft, melodic, familiar in a way that makes Claire's skin prickle. She slips out of bed and steps into the hallway. The air feels colder here, as if the house exhales differently at night. She descends the stairs slowly, each step groaning under her weight. The living room is dim, lit only by the dying embers of the fireplace. But something is different. The family portrait above the mantel has changed again. The scratched-out faces are clearer now, still blurred, but undeniably human. The woman who looks like Evelyn stands in the center, her smile stretched wider, her eyes sharper. Claire steps closer, heart thudding, and notices something else. The background of the portrait has shifted. The valley behind the family is now covered in fog, just like the valley outside tonight. She backs away. On the coffee table sits the jar of jam Evelyn gave them. The lid is off. A spoon rests beside it, sticky with red. Claire didn't open it. Mark didn't either. She hears the humming again, this time behind her. She spins around, but the room is empty. The humming stops. Claire returns upstairs, shaken. She wakes Mark and tells him what she saw. He tries to reassure her, but when he goes downstairs to check, the portrait is back to its original state. Scratched faces, unchanged background. The jam jar is sealed. Maybe you were half asleep, Mark says gently. Claire doesn't argue, but she knows what she saw. The next morning, the house feels different. Brighter, almost cheerful. Sunlight spills across the wooden floors, warming the air. Claire tries to shake off the night, but the unease lingers like a shadow. While Mark makes coffee, Claire wanders into the hallway and notices something odd. The guest book on the table is open to a page she didn't leave it on. The entry reads, "First night is always the same. Don't worry, it gets easier." The handwriting is shaky, rushed. Claire flips back through the pages. She finds another entry from the same name, dated 5 years earlier. Back again. I didn't want to return, but the house remembered. She closes the book quickly. Outside, fog rolls across the valley, thick and slow. The house seems to breathe with it, boards expanding and contracting like lungs. Mark calls from the kitchen. "Claire, did you move my keys?" She didn't. He finds them on the porch railing, placed neatly, as if someone set them there with intention. Claire steps outside to retrieve them. The air is cold, colder than it should be for the morning. She looks out over the valley and sees something that makes her breath catch. A figure stands at the edge of the fog, still, watching. She blinks and it's gone. When she returns inside, the house feels warmer again, almost welcoming, almost grateful. Mark laughs nervously and says, "Old houses do weird things." Claire doesn't answer. She looks at the portrait above the fireplace. The scratched out faces seem a little less scratched than before. And the woman who looks like Evelyn, her smile is wider. Claire wakes to the smell of coffee and the sound of Mark humming in the kitchen. For a moment, everything feels normal. The sunlight spills across the floorboards in the same warm pattern as yesterday. The valley outside is wrapped in the same soft fog. The house feels calm, almost welcoming. But something is wrong. Claire walks into the kitchen and freezes. Mark is wearing the same clothes he wore yesterday. The same shirt, the same socks, the same tiny stain on his sleeve from the jam jar. She asks, "Didn't you change?" Mark laughs. "I just woke up. Why would I change?" Claire brushes it off until she sees the guest book on the table. It's open to the same page as yesterday. The same entry, the same handwriting, the same date. She flips the page. Blank. She flips back. The entry is still there. First night is always the same. Don't worry. It gets easier. Claire feels a chill crawl up her spine. She steps outside to clear her head. The air is cold, colder than it should be. The fog hangs low, thick and unmoving. She looks at the porch railing and sees Mark's keys sitting neatly on the wood, exactly where they were yesterday. She picks them up. They're cold, too cold. When she returns inside, Mark is staring at the fireplace. The family portrait has changed again. The scratched out faces are now fully visible, 3 people smiling stiffly. The woman who looks like Evelyn stands in the center, her smile unnaturally wide. Mark whispers, "Claire, I swear this wasn't like this last night." Claire nods. "I know." They decide to leave. They pack quickly, grab their bags, and head for the car. But when Mark turns the key, the engine sputters and dies. He tries again. Nothing. Claire looks up the driveway. The fog has thickened, forming a wall. A shape stands at the edge of it, still, watching. Mark doesn't see it. Claire does. She whispers, "We're not supposed to leave." They return inside, shaken. The house feels warmer again, as if pleased. The floorboards creak softly, almost rhythmically. Claire feels the weight of the house around her, like it's listening. That night, the humming returns. This time, it's louder. And this time, Mark hears it too. The humming moves through the house like a slow tide. Claire and Mark follow the sound to the living room. The fireplace flickers, casting long shadows across the walls. The family portrait has changed again. Now Claire and Mark are in it, standing beside Evelyn. Their faces are blurred, but unmistakably theirs. Mark steps back, heart pounding. "This is impossible." Claire whispers, "It's remembering us." The humming stops abruptly. The house falls silent. Then, from the hallway, a door creaks open on its own. The guest rooms. They approach cautiously. Inside, the bed is perfectly made. A suitcase sits on the floor, old, leather, worn. Claire opens it. Inside are clothes, a toothbrush, a journal. The name on the first page, Evelyn Hale. The entries describe guests who stayed at the house, guests who left, guests who returned, guests who didn't survive the second visit. Claire closes the journal with shaking hands. The house groans as if shifting its weight. Evelyn arrives unannounced the next morning. She stands on the porch, hands folded, eyes calm. "You open the guest room," she says. Claire nods. Evelyn sighs. "The house doesn't like that." Mark steps forward. "What's happening here?" Evelyn studies them. The house remembers every guest, keeps their stories. Sometimes it wants them back. Claire asks, "Why us?" Evelyn's expression softens. "Because you remind me of someone." She doesn't explain further. Before she leaves, she says, "Don't stay a second night," but they already have. Claire wakes to the same sunlight, the same fog, the same humming, the same day. Mark tries the car again. Dead. Claire checks the guest book. The same entry appears again. Back again. Didn't expect to return. She flips the page. A new line appears beneath it. "You're almost ready." Claire drops the book. Claire notices a draft coming from behind the bookshelf. She pushes it aside, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. The basement is cold, damp, silent. On the far wall hangs a collage of photographs, hundreds of them. Guests smiling, guests arriving, guests leaving, and guests returning. Claire finds a photo of Evelyn, young, smiling, standing beside a couple who look terrified. Mark finds a photo of them, taken yesterday, but from an angle no one could have taken. Claire whispers, "The house is watching us." Evelyn returns at dusk, frantic. "You need to leave. Now." Mark snaps, "We can't. The car won't start." Evelyn closes her eyes. Then the house has chosen. Claire asks, "Chosen what?" Evelyn looks at her with sorrow. "A memory keeper." The house groans above them, boards shifting like a living thing. Evelyn explains the truth. The house is old, older than the valley, older than the town. Feeds on memory, keeps the stories of those who stay. But every decade, it chooses someone to anchor its memories. A keeper, someone who survives once and must return. Evelyn was the last keeper. Now the house wants a new one. Claire refuses. She storms into the basement and tears down the photographs. She reads aloud the names of every guest, every family, every person the house has trapped. The house shakes violently. Lights flicker. The humming becomes a roar. Claire shouts, "You don't get to keep us." The house shudders. And then, silence. The car starts. The fog lifts. Evelyn stands on the porch, tears in her eyes. "You freed them," she whispers. Claire and Mark drive away as the sun rises. The house grows smaller in the rearview mirror. But Claire feels something tug at her memory, like a thread being pulled. She whispers, "Don't look back." Mark doesn't. Weeks later, Claire receives a postcard, a photograph of the Ridgeview Retreat. On the back, a single sentence, "Thank you for remembering." Claire drops the card. For a moment, in the reflection of the window, she sees Evelyn's face instead of her own. Then it's gone. The house still stands, and somewhere it hums.